The first time Liora laid eyes on him, she was no more than 7 cycles old. On her home planet of Zephyria, that was considered early childhood, but for a species that lived for centuries, it was barely the blink of an eye. The humans visiting her city were a rare sight. They arrived in gleaming silver ships that shimmered like the Zephyrian sky at dawn, and among them, he stood out, not for his uniform or his medals, but for the quiet kindness in his eyes. He smiled at her, knelt, and whispered words she didn't fully understand but felt in her bones. "One day, I will return, and I will marry you." The memory was etched into her soul. Liora's family thought it was childish nonsense, the fanciful imagination of a young girl enchanted by a fleeting human visitor. But for Liora, it became a promise she clung to through decades of waiting, through wars that scorched her world, and through the endless nights when the twin moons of Zephyria seemed too distant to comfort her. Years passed. Liora grew into her grace, her beauty, and her lethal agility. Humans returned to Zephyria on rare occasions, mostly for trade, sometimes for diplomacy, but never him. She watched every silver ship in the sky, her heart pounding with a hope that was both fragile and unyielding. Her people began to whisper. "The human will not come," they said. "He has forgotten you." But Liora refused to believe them. She remembered the warmth of his hands, the softness of his voice, and the sincerity in his eyes. How could he forget a promise made to a child? It was during the 6th celestial convergence, a rare alignment of Zephyria's 3 suns, that she saw him again. He arrived in a ship unlike any other, dark as obsidian and humming with an energy that made the air itself vibrate. Her heart recognized him before her mind could comprehend. He was older now as humans aged, but the kindness in his eyes was unchanged. "Liora," he said, stepping onto the landing platform as if no time had passed at all. "I promised I would return. I have kept my word." Tears streamed down her face. Years of waiting, of longing, of imagining this moment, came crashing together in a storm of joy and disbelief. You remembered?" she whispered, barely able to form words. "I never forgot," he replied. "Not once." Yet the joy was quickly tempered by the reality that neither of them had anticipated. Zephyria had changed. Human colonies had begun to press against its borders. The peaceful, crystalline cities were now fortified with weapons the likes of which humans had never seen. And Liora herself had been trained to fight, to protect her people, to make choices that could alter the fate of her world. He came not as a savior but as a negotiator, a human envoy tasked with brokering peace, but also with securing an alliance through marriage. Not everyone on Zephyria was pleased. The Council of Elders, who had guided Liora since her childhood, viewed this promise as an outdated sentiment, a childish bond that could endanger their people. "You do not understand," Liora argued fiercely during the council meeting. "It was not a childish promise. It was love. And I will not let it be dismissed as folly." "You are blinded by affection," Elder Vea replied. "Human motives are complex, and their desire for power is as vast as the galaxies. We cannot allow sentiment to dictate the fate of Zephyria." Liora's heart ached, but she would not surrender. She returned to her quarters, pacing among the crystalline spires that jutted from her palace floor. She could still hear his voice in her memory, still feel the warmth of the hand that had promised her the impossible. And she knew, deep in her being, that to truly honor the promise, she must test the man who had returned after decades. The next morning, she arranged a private meeting with him in the Hall of Eternal Light, a place where Zephyria's suns refracted through prisms to create endless rainbows on the floors. "If you truly remember your promise, you will prove it," she said. Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. He looked around, sensing the weight of her challenge. "I would cross galaxies, fight wars, and face the end of time itself for you," he said. "Tell me what you need." "You must know Zephyria," she said. "Not as a human observer, but as someone willing to live, to fight, to endure our world as we do. You will face the trials of alignment, where our people's greatest warriors test strength, courage, and honor. Only then will I believe that your promise is real." He nodded without hesitation. "Then I will face them. For you." The trials were brutal. They tested the limits of human endurance against Zephyrian physics, against gravity that shifted with the suns, and against creatures that moved between dimensions like water through a sieve. He stumbled, he fell. He was scorched by the sun's rays and injured by illusions designed to break the mind. But he rose each time, driven by a determination that only Liora's promise could inspire. Throughout the trials, Liora observed him. She had feared he might fail, that time and distance had weakened his resolve. But he endured. And each time he rose, each time he pressed forward despite pain, her love for him grew deeper. Not the childish infatuation of a girl, but the profound respect and passion of a woman who had waited a lifetime. The final trial brought them to the edge of infinity, a cliff where the void of space stretched beneath them. To succeed, he had to leap into the unknown, trusting in nothing but Liora's promise and the bond they shared. He looked at her, and she saw the same man who had knelt before her as a child. "Do you trust me?" he asked. "With everything I am," she replied. He leapt. The void seemed to stretch endlessly, and for a moment, Liora feared she had misjudged his resolve. Then, a golden light enveloped him, and he emerged unscathed, standing before her with a smile that took her breath away. "You have proven it," Liora said, tears streaming down her face. "You kept your promise." "I always will," he whispered. The council could no longer object. They saw, not just a human who had returned, but a man whose devotion and courage were undeniable. In a ceremony that combined human tradition with Zephyrian rites, they were married under the three suns, their vows echoing across valleys and cities. But even as they celebrated, the larger universe waited with its usual unpredictability. Warships from other systems lurked at the edges of Zephyria's orbit, and alliances were fragile. Yet, for the first time in her long life, Liora felt a sense of peace. She had waited, endured, and believed. And now, the promise made to a child had become a bond that could withstand galaxies. In the quiet moments after the ceremony, as the suns dipped behind crystalline spires and cast a kaleidoscope of light across the palace, he held her close. "We will face whatever comes," he said. "Together." "And we will endure," she replied. "As we always have." Liora realized that waiting had not been passive. It had been preparation. She had grown into the woman capable of matching his courage, his love, and his strength. And he had proven that promises made in innocence could withstand the test of time, space, and the infinite uncertainties of the universe. Years later, when their children played under the twin moons and the humans and Zephyrians worked together to build a future neither could have imagined alone, Liora would sometimes sit quietly, remembering that day she first heard his promise. And she would smile, knowing that true devotion was rare, fragile, and yet, sometimes, everlasting. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and often cruel. But in their love, they had found a constant. And for Liora, that constant was worth every cycle of waiting, every test of courage, and every heartbeat that had led her to him.